color is the foundation of great design. It can settle a building into its landscape. It can make an unattractive structural detail just disappear, and it can change your mood in a room instantly. Welcome to Let's Talk Color. I'm Amy Crane, architectural color consultant at Amy Crane Color. I'm a color expert and use color to transform spaces and products from the ordinary to the sublime. As a paint color specialist, realtor, and design writer, I've got my finger on the pulse of what's happening in the world of color. In each episode, I'll reveal best practices for choosing color by introducing you to masters of color for the built world. So throw out those paint chips taped to your walls and let's get started. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to talk about a new product and the people who brought it to the market. When a company has a tagline, paint your walls with rock instead of plastic, it's got to pique your interest. It did mine. Alkemis is a new premium, all-natural interior paint from artist-quality crystalline pigments that promote both human wellness and environmental consciousness. Their 119 shades are mineral-based, making them non-toxic and zero VOC. The brand guarantees 20-plus years of fade-free, light-fast coverage, which is amazing. So let me introduce the two co-founders, Maya Crowne and Price Latimer. Maya is the CEO. She has a professional background in finance. She considers herself a junior art collector and has also studied art. Price is the CCO with a BFA from RISD. She recently went to Parsons for interior design. With a background as an artist, curator, Price is also a designer. So welcome to both of you.
Thanks for having us.
My pleasure. I hear the origin of the paint came out of a home painting project for you, Maya, during COVID. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, Amy, just a quick background. My mom, when I was growing up, was a decorative painter and multidisciplinary artist. So like any teenager, I felt compelled to rebel and go into finance. But I found my way back into the art world about 5 years ago. I started collecting a little bit of art and spending a lot more time with materials. And I started taking classes at the New York Academy of Art. And during the pandemic, the school closed down. So I really found my artistic practice as like an active meditation. And so I was looking for a creative project to do inside of my home. And I thought maybe I'll try to repaint my apartment. So I went to a local hardware store. I was wearing my N95 mask, and I quickly started to smell that familiar paint smell fume. Obviously, I knew from art school when we were getting rid of washing our brushes and handling certain types of products, we had to be really careful. And so I started to think, like, why is it that interior paint smells so bad? And I went on Google when I got home. I realized that it would not be possible for me to purchase this paint and actually paint inside of my apartment because I live in 450 square feet. So I couldn't go anywhere. My neighbor certainly couldn't go anywhere. Everyone was concerned about being able to breathe at the time. And I just was like, why does paint smell so bad? Are we actually covering our walls with the same things that like we're painting pictures with that I have to be really careful about disposing of? And I realized 95% of paint that we use globally is acrylic latex based, which by definition is plastic. And that was sort of shocking to me. I figured we've obviously been painting spaces long before the advent of plastic, and there had to be a different way. So that was really how the idea of Alkemis started. I coincidentally met Price as well a couple months afterwards in 2020, and we really bonded over our shared love of art and aesthetics and environmentalism and spiritualism and wellness and all of it. And so I mentioned to her this project that I was considering undertaking. And she was really surprised and thought it was a really great idea. And, I had gone to her for advice just because I loved her taste. I knew it was really important for me as somebody that also considers myself as a self-proclaimed aesthete. that any type of product that I would create would be not just healthy and good for the environment, but aesthetically beautiful, especially in the world of design. And I thought that maybe price could help point me in the right direction. And I was incredibly flattered when I found out what she did professionally and that, the timing had really been ideal for her to join me, as my co-founder. And so I'll pause there and let her, share her experience.
Amazing.
Yeah. So to Maya's point, Alchemist really brings together all of the things that I care about and that I'm passionate about. And it's really interesting to have had all these kind of diverse experiences in the art world and in the design world, and to be able to bring all of that to the table to really shift the industry away from these deleterious practices that are harmful both to the environment as well as to human health, and to hopefully really make a difference in this industry, and also to really educate people about what's really going on.
I want to talk about the name for a sec. Alchemist. So you can correct me if I'm wrong. I read that it is a Swedish word for alchemy. Alchemy being the transformation of matter. This is the precursor, the science, as it were, that came before science, before modern chemistry. Why give it a Swedish name? I get alchemy.
Well, I mean, to be totally transparent, it had a bit to do with trademark law and a bit to do with also just the spelling of alchemy in the Swedish Scandinavian way is slightly more abridged and a little bit more unique, but it still has the same sound from a wording perspective. So we thought it was really beautiful and modern and cool, and we're big fans of Scandinavian design in general. So
what was the learning curve like to launch it? I mean, there was a hell of a lot of, I would imagine, manufacturing and science and sourcing materials, storage. I mean, even before you get to how do we distribute it and who's going to market it with us and all of that. What was the learning curve like to make it?
It was steep. Of course, we spoke to a ton of experts. We were not clear on what direction we really wanted to go in. Early on, there was a lot of we did about 4 years of R&D, but it started with a lot of exploration, particularly around natural pigments, sort of what we're doing within the fashion industry, and seeing if there was opportunity to leverage organic natural pigments like turmeric or, sweet pea flower or things of that nature that the textile industry is leveraging. And we spoke to experts in that space, and they kind of introduced us to more people and more people. Eventually, we hired a group of chemists to do a feasibility study for us. And that really gave us sort of a roadmap. And what was interesting, chemists are an interesting breed in the way that they view things. But what was clear was they were concerned about the light fastness of organic pigments in being able to withstand, various forms of daylight over time. And so that became a concern. Nobody wants, even if a paint is absolutely healthy, if it fades over time, that could be problematic. And so that's really when we started to get interested in mineral technology. Mineral paints and different types of stone-based paints are not very commonly used in the United States, but there are other parts of the world in which they employ these sort of technologies. So we were also we have an incredible silent advisor that was the head of research and development for one of the largest paint companies here in the United States, who really helped us, figure out who to talk to. And from there, that's really how we were able to start developing a formula and manufacturing capacity and ability.
Right. What about sourcing your mineral ingredients? I do not know. I did not research this, but I would imagine that they come from all over the world. Do you think geopolitics will affect your ability down the road in terms of always being able to get your minerals?
Right now, actually, all of our raw materials are sourced within a 350-mile radius in order to keep our carbon footprint low. So
Wow.
that is a very interesting question, though, that does keep me up at night. I mean, right now, where they are sourced from is not an area that is
In conflict.
in conflict from a geopolitical perspective, but it is certainly something that we are keeping a close eye on. I mean, we saw with the pandemic that shipping materials in general became problematic, and we know that we're in a very chaotic time right now. So
Yeah, well said.
And we are vertically integrated as well. So yeah, everything from under our cradle to cradle certification, everything from our manufacturing and production standards and perspectives are all assessed to make sure that we are up to speed with the most environmentally stringent standards in the world.
Great. Modern latex paint, which is really acrylic paint, is water-based using acrylic polymers, polyvinyl acetate, and pigments. And what I didn't know is that these paints, which, even the low VOC ones, you certainly smell it when you paint. A couple of days later, it's lightened up. And then soon-ish after that, you don't smell your paint anymore, which is why I was very surprised to hear that conventional paint can off-gas for up to 10 years. That was really disappointing. I also read that the biggest contributor of microplastics in the ocean is paint, and that is just devastating that somehow paint is in our waterways. Paint uses over 90 million metric tons of petroleum a year, which obviously complicates our goal to get off of fossil fuels. So, can you talk a little bit more about what's in it and how is it different? And what are the attributes of it being like that?
yeah, well, I think you hit on the first aspect of that, which is the majority of conventional paints, 95% of them are essentially plastic based and derived from acrylic and latex. Our paint is fundamentally different in that it is mineral based. The majority of the formula is actually derived from, the minerals that make up the crust of the earth. And so they're constantly replenishing. And as a function of that, we also have, we use 10 natural pigments, which are not rare and have been used since the dawn of time. Examples of that are hematite, which is a beautiful red iron oxide, or goethite, which makes a variety of colors. And so often conventional paints are using synthetic pigments in addition to these milky plastic bases and binders. And so of course, it was important that, from a performance perspective, if we're going out there and saying, we have this product that is better for you and better for the environment, that it needed to not only meet conventional paint standards, but ideally exceed them. And if you just think about it, like rock doesn't burn, like you could light a rock on fire and it's never going to burn. As a function of that, our paint is Class A certified fire resistant. So for commercial buildings or commercial designers, architects, is that something that's generally very important. Another thing, you had alluded to smell. I mean, like one of the things that I think that customers inherently notice, and, we just did an installation for a beautiful design gallery here in New York. It is the New York home of Jean Royer, the furniture designer from Paris. And that literally the team painted the gallery like 2 weeks ago. And the creative director was telling me that everyone was like stressed out and didn't want to be in the studio while they were painting because they were going to get a headache and they were going to get sick. And the team's painting and nobody even noticed. Literally, they had their opening cocktail yesterday and nobody would have ever guessed in a million years that the place had been painted just 2 days prior. Naturally, these materials, they don't smell, they don't off gas because they're made of rock. Another really huge factor is the fact that they are inherently porous and vapor permeable. So they naturally are high in alkaline, and it makes mold and fungus and algae virtually impossible to grow because water doesn't condense on top like it would a plastic. We're essentially wrapping our walls with saran wrap. It actually absorbs into the porous layer of paint and then it dries out just as a rock would. These pigments never fade because they're made out of rock. And so we can guarantee double the lifetime performance of conventional paints, if not longer. And, that has to do, again, when I say all of this stuff out loud to people, it is not terribly surprising because when you think about a rock, you're like, oh yeah.
My favorite finish for almost every room in the house in other paint brands is matte. I don't really like shine. I mean, use a bit on trim and things like that, but I'm really into that very flat, milky, suede-like texture. But a benefit of the technology, let's say, that went into making modern acrylic paints, matte paints, is that they are sold as washable or wipeable. So you get a smudge, you moved your furniture, you scuffed it, your kid put a hand on it, whatever. So yours is not plastic and it is not like a film over the sheetrock, right? It embeds, I would think it embeds to the wall in a different way. What can you say then about its wipeability and washability?
So we're actually best in class as far as abrasion and scrub resistance goes. So class 1 across the board. So it's comparable to any of those, the wipeability of any of these conventional paint brands, but without all of the toxins. And so again, inherently, if you think about, well, it dries hard as a rock. It actually chemically bonds and fuses to the underlying substrate. So again, that bond is incredibly strong, incredibly durable. The reason why, and we get this question all the time, well, do you offer semi-gloss? Do you offer satin? Do you offer eggshell? So we really like to just reset and reframe people's perspective, because once you start thinking about it, well, the reason why there are multiple sheens in conventional paints is the higher the sheen, the more plastic, the more resin, all of these particular ingredients that we are trying to avoid. So we offer the one matte velvet sheen, which is simultaneously matte and velvet, but it also has this really high luminosity due to the clear crystal quartz binder and the natural pigments. So Maya mentioned a little bit earlier, conventional paint is made with like a milky plastic binder injected with chemical colorants. So our binder is clear crystal quartz. So these all natural pigments are actually embedded in a clear glass-like binder. So they're able to shine through with this unparalleled luminosity. And we get this comment all the time, like just in High Point over the past weekend, everybody was like, I just can't get over how the paint changes and shifts with the light throughout the day. So it's this really great, just beautiful surprise that you get in the way that it plays off the light.
That's really interesting. I really have to wrap my head around this because it almost sounds contradictory, but I get that it isn't. On one hand, matte means not reflective, right? And yet you're talking about luminosity and reflectivity. So somehow it's both. And I can't wait to see that, in terms of, like you said, someone pulling a suitcase, inadvertently kicking the baseboard in their house, it does get more scuffs. And so we've learned to accept and expect the higher shine in the trim because functionally they put it there. But aesthetically, that's what we've grown to accept as the way to paint. So it's interesting. It will be very interesting and I hope that any any consumers out there who want to try your paint, who buy your paint, and fall in love with the paint and the colors and everything, also accept this new way of thinking about what to do with their trim. Because it seems from what you've said, you've solved the durability question because it's washable and it's hard as rock. But people have to accept the fact that there is no shininess in their trim. So that should be very interesting.
Yeah, and just to clarify, so we don't recommend it for large, like swaths of wood paneling, doors, cabinetry. I mean, people do it all the time, but it's really the way that it adheres to wood because of the way that wood fluctuates with humidity, expands and contracts, is just a little bit different than the way that our paint adheres to, drywall, concrete, plaster, stucco, brick. So anyway, well, we have a bunch of ideas about additional products to roll out down the road. So we do hope to release a trim cabinetry door specific paint down the road. But for now, it's fine for, low traffic trim.
Right. Got it.
So for instance, we had a client in Brooklyn who had a bachelor pad that was painted, floor to ceiling black. And when he wanted to sell it, and of course the realtor was like, look, you need to paint this all white. He had a number of painting contractors come in, give him quotes, and they said, look, you're going to have to paint at least 2 coats of primer and likely a couple coats of white after that. We came in, we did 2 coats of Alkemis paint, no primer, and it went seamlessly from black to white and looks fantastic. So the amount of time and money that you're saving, not only on materials, but on labor as well, is really significant.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that's fantastic. Sampling paint is so important when you are picking your colors. I send my clients, many companies, not all of them, have the ability for me to send them large paper samples. And I tell them to use that to narrow down. And then even after you've done that, if you want to be positive, you love the color, get a quart and put it on 2 coats and check it out. So, how are you selling it, and how are you helping consumers know that they like the color?
So, Amy, you're preaching our language over here because we offer a fan deck. We offer the 8x11 sample swatches for all of our colors, and we offer quarts. Generally speaking, purchase a fan deck, pick out the colors you like, buy the 8x11 swatches, and then we always recommend, particularly with, rooms that get a lot of light, purchasing, the quart and testing it in situ to ensure that you like the way that it looks.
Everyone I spend a lot of time explaining to people that color is reflected light. It literally is reflected light. So the light changes during the day, your color will change. That's it. And, people love the color on the front of the side of the house, but not the front of the house. It's like, listen, cloudy day, sunny day, rainy day, fall, winter, you're in the north, you're in the south. This is the nature of life. And we have to accept it, but also embrace it. I mean, it is dynamic, it's mutable, and that's what makes it alive, right? Let's talk color, finally. So you have 119 colors. They're organized into 4 elemental collections: fire, water, air, and earth. I know when you create a curated collection of colors, you have to be pretty ruthless when you make your final selection to keep the overall number down. Start by talking about what the vision was for the palette. Was there an overreaching idea for the whole palette? And then perhaps, you can talk a little bit more on a granular level. But, what was your vision for the colors?
Yeah, I think originally we had about the number in our head about 75 to 100. But then when we went to actually develop the palette, so of course I started with a much broader palette and developed all of these colors and went through different iterations in different versions of, what qualifies as the entire palette, and, sent that to trusted people, designers, artists, architects, and got their feedback. Like, hey, do you think we need some more whites? Do we need more neutrals? Do we have enough blues? Do we have enough dark colors? And So ultimately, just over time and just really just old school, like graphic design, like taking the paint samples, laying everything out on an enormous table and arranging them, being like, that one works next to this, that one doesn't quite work. And like really figuring out that order and that flow and that relationship between all of the different colors. But I would say we started probably with about 200, maybe 250 colors. And then, like anything, like we're going to do with this podcast and edit out our flubs and errors. Um, and you being a color expert, the magic is in the editing, right? And that's absolutely, I think, what creates this finished product that's really special is having that critical eye to go in and say, you know what, this works, this doesn't work. So we just whittled it down. And, after internal feedback and external feedback with trusted sources, we really felt that we nailed this. And of course, we plan to release additional color collections over time.
You were the main person developing the color line. Did you go to your chemists or your manufacturers or your people making the paint, and did you say, here's a favorite sweater, do this, or did you send them Swipe? Remember Swipe? We used to tear magazines out back in the day, or digital Swipe or whatever. I mean, how did you advise them where you wanted each color to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of all of these things. And, starting off with color references, whether that was Pantone colors or existing colors in nature. So it was really a combination of all of those different things to get kind of the initial base colors and then tweak them and push them in whatever direction and then edit them down.
Makes sense.
And of course, there are parameters too, because we're using 10 natural pigments. And, there are certain colors that I wanted to create that I'm like, you just can't get. And I mean, don't get me wrong. There are plenty, there are a plethora and, countless colors that we're able to achieve. But, fluorescent, anything that's really synthetic, that's very chemically composed. So fluorescents, so on and so forth are difficult to achieve. There are limitations, but like that's the beauty of any creative project, right? Is parameters, and you work within those parameters. And so, again, there are no real concessions there, but just being mindful of like what the capabilities are of these actual natural pigments.
Got it. Okay. I went through the palette, and I'm going to tell you how I would describe it. So I would say it's very fashion forward in terms of interiors. You've got some really modern, like what's happening right now colors in terms of ochre yellow, olive greens, and some browns, which is like really 2023, 2024 kind of colors. Beautiful selection of off-whites, which is really important because let's face it, a lot of people buy it. Got a lot of warm gray colors like taupes, mushrooms, things like that. A fair number of deep colors, a tiny handful of highly chromatic saturated colors, which have limited use, but someone will need them for something. Here's what I don't think you have. You don't have any near neutrals or complex neutrals like blue grays, green grays, and blue-green grays. Is that a conscious decision or a limitation of your pigments?
I would say a little bit of both. And I would say that there are some of those colors waiting in the wings to ultimately be released at a later date. But I'd say some of it, I mean, the gray, a lot of times these mineral pigments like tend to veer on the side of being a little warmer, if that makes sense, just naturally. So to your point, I think that's why things kind of like tilt a little bit one direction, or more on the warmer side of things. And so, for the cool pigments, those are more limited. Just as far as like we use 10 natural pigments, like there are a smaller number of cool pigments, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What kind of colors up to now are selling the most? And is it different in different parts of the country?
Oh, great question. You want to take that one?
I noticed that when we first launched, like these deep reds. Like we have a color called Hair of the Dog. It's almost more of like a brownish red that's really beautiful, really elegant, very sexy, was very popular. And so I was sort of surprised by that. I mean, we did a really beautiful installation with it. It has like, kind of like a masculine sort of undertone as well. And so that I think was really popular last year, whereas I'm sort of noticing like, and I don't know if this is, I don't know why, but we have a really beautiful mauvey pink. We have some of the most beautiful pink colors that I've ever seen. And we have one color called Baroque Floor Show that, a lot of people love. It's not too girly or too feminine. It's really an elegant pink, but it would work well inside of a child's room, and it would work really well inside of, any room, quite frankly. And so I think that it has a lot of utility. And again, because of the natural tone of the natural pigment, it really has an elegance. Like I would say all of our colors. I think that we have a really beautiful bright blue. We have two really beautiful bright blues, but Lazurite is like this royal blue that is made out of ultramarine that is just like the most gorgeous blue you've ever seen. And I tend to find that is one of the colors that like men and women mutually just love and are very drawn to. And then of course, I mean, to your point, the colors that we sell a lot of are our whites and our neutrals, which I think are, especially with the finish of Alkemis Paint, they, even though they are white and neutral, they add that like beautiful warmth and like reflective quality of being like inside of a stone building or like a plaster, and so it really adds this elegance, even if it is a very common color like a white. It really adds an elegance to a space that's unique. I mean, to the point that I was making yesterday when I was at this toast for Maison Royer, the majority of the space was painted in a white, and they just loved it. They just thought it was so incredibly elegant, the way that it reflected light and unique. So
I would definitely say the trend right now is towards warmer whites as opposed to cooler whites, which, there have been periods of time where everybody was like going for either like a very neutral white or a much kind of starker white. So we like this move towards something a little warmer. So our color Blanche Neige is one of our best sellers, hands down.
Did you want to evoke the look of a color, the emotion you might get from being in a room in that color? What was it all different? What was your approach to naming names?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of the above. Some of them are, literary references, geographical references, musical references, art references, alchemical references. And I think, yeah, we really wanted to find a name that embodied the vibe of each color. And certainly like Baroque Floor Show is a type of rose, for instance. So it's a dusty rose color. So there is a correlation there. We tried to have fun with it first and foremost. And it's also one of those things where you're like, I've got a perfect name for color, and then you go and you Google and you're like, well shit, somebody else like already took that 4 times over. So it is a very interesting exercise in creativity, because you do have to push the boundaries, because a lot of color names have already been used. So it forced us to put on our thinking caps and really explore outside of the English language.
Any interest in joining the hullabaloo this time of year, every year, for color of the year, or are you going to not be part of that shenanigans?
We're not intending to be part of the shenanigans, not because we consider ourselves above it or anything like that, but simply because we just have a lot of work to do. And yeah, but we are doing a really fun activation with Design Miami. I'm not sure when this will air, but one of the colors, we did a custom palette for Design Miami in line with their curatorial theme. And one of the colors we're going to open up to the World Wide Web and the in the massive audience to actually name the color. So that will be a really fun activation that we're looking forward to seeing how people respond to that. Because to your point, naming colors is really, really fun. And it was certainly a pleasure to be able to do. And then describing them is like a whole other thing, which is really fun to do.
Yeah, a different way of engagement this year instead of doing a color of the year. But we understand, the color of the year can be a really exciting marketing initiative and, again, engagement technique to get people excited about, these new color releases, which, again, everyone's excited. Everyone's excited about new colors.
Absolutely. It touches something in all of us. I mean, yeah, thank you. Thank you both. This has been really fun, enlightening, and I'm going to pick some special room in my house. I don't know which one, and I'm going to try the paint.
Oh, we'd be so honored. Thanks, Amy. It's been such a pleasure and honor.